Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melisa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to episode 232 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. This is Melisa Lieberman, and today we're talking about the mindset behind $1 million independent consulting business. This is part 2 of a 2-part series. So last week we talked about part 1, where I went over what is $1 million mindset and the first 2 mindsets behind the 6 components of $1 million mindset. Most all the time when I do a multiple part series, I recommend just listen to this one and then go back and catch the other parts later. I'm going to say the opposite to you today. If you have not yet listened to episode 231, I would suggest pausing this one, keep it in your queue, pause it, go back to episode 231 and listen to that one. It's going to give you all of the background behind this $1 million mindset and the first 2 pillars of the 6 pillars. So go back and listen to episode 231 if you haven't already, and then come back here. And now that you're here, we're going to today focus on the remaining 4 pillars. I'm going to do a brief refresher so that if you listened to part 1 a while ago, you just don't fully remember it, not a problem. I'm going to do a brief refresher, and then we're going to dive into the 4 remaining pillars that we haven't yet touched on. Again, the first 2 pillars and a much more in-depth description of the $1 million mindset is in episode 231. And today we're focusing on the remaining 4 of 6 pillars with a little bit of a refresh on what is the $1 million mindset. So that's what we're here for. The combination of these 2 episodes, if I don't say so myself, is incredibly powerful for you in your consulting business. When you're thinking about the way you're thinking, and shifting the way you're thinking into the way a $1 million independent consultant thinks, you end up making those results possible for you, that you also make it so much easier to achieve those results. So this is incredibly important. And in 2 of the episodes that I know that I will be pointing people back to over and over again, because it's just the foundation for success for you in your consulting business. Whether you want to generate $1 million or maybe 750 or even 500, this is the foundation that is critically important for you. And so that's why I've recorded these 2 episodes, and I'm excited for you to hear today. So with that, let's dive in. We'll talk about the agenda. So I'm going to, again, briefly touch on what is the $1 million mindset. Again, I went much more in depth last week in episode 231, but today I'm just going to give you a light refresher in case you've already listened to that episode and want to just remind yourself what we were talking about. And then we'll talk through those remaining 4 components of the $1 million mindset. And then we'll talk about how to put this episode into action. It can be really tricky with mindset to make it actionable. This is so important. It's something that I'm always focused in on, helping you to figure out how to make mindset actionable. It's not just about knowing that mindset's important. It's not just about knowing that even awareness from a mindset perspective. It's about how to actually implement the tools that you can leverage to shift your mindset so that you think by default, so that you think even unintentionally in a different way than you're thinking right now, so that you can enable different results for yourself. That's why the actionable mindset is so important. All right. Before we talk about the refresher of what is $1 million mindset, I want to remind you of the companion resource for this 2-part series, and that is the Business Brain Journal. This is one of the 3 physical products that I have recently developed over the last year, and it will be coming soon on Amazon. The Business Brain Journal is a 100-day process to help you evolve the way you think, to set yourself up to achieve bigger goals more easily. So you can go on the wait list. This is a bit of a long URL, so we'll put this in the description here in your podcast player and also in the show notes. But the URL is www.melissalieberman.com/growth-atlas-products. A little bit long. I'll say it one more time. And I will also tell you my name is missing letters. So my first name is spelled Melisa. My last name is spelled Liberman. So www.melissalieberman.com/growth-atlas-products. There you will find a simple page where you can put your name and email and therefore be updated on the products as soon as they are available. It's a limited edition here in the first run of the product, so you'll want to be on that wait list so that you don't miss out on the opportunity to grab your own Business Brain journal and go through that 100-day challenge to help you up-level the way you're thinking so that you fuel those bigger results in your business. And by bigger, it can be more money and also more time and more fulfillment. We're not just talking about working yourself to the bone to create more money. It's about those three things and whatever goals you personally have. Okay, so with that, now let's dive into a light refresher on what is the $1 million mindset. Simply put, the $1 million mindset for you as an independent consultant. And I want to reiterate that we're not talking about you needing to grow a boutique consultancy or into a small firm. If you want that, fabulous. There's so many consultants out there who are growing into that. But if you are someone who wants to say solo, like so many of us, this is a $1 million mindset made for you. It helps you to operate. This $1 million mindset is one where you're operating from a business owner perspective. And that might sound obvious. Of course, you likely are very well aware you have a business. But so oftentimes we think of our business from an employee mindset or from a more doer perspective, the actual the person who's consulting versus a business owner perspective. So the $1 million mindset is you operating from a business owner perspective where you're thinking and deciding and leading yourself as an employee as a business of one, leading yourself like the business you're building. So future focus versus the one you have today. You're constantly, I love to think about this as we're operating from where we want to be and looking backward, even though we're not there yet. We're thinking and deciding and leading from that headspace of, in this case, the $1 million mindset and working our way backward versus thinking from where we are now and striving forward. This helps you to prioritize things like business development, strategic focus, thinking time as a CEO or business owner, and revenue generating activities. This is the $1 million mindset. Without the $1 million mindset, I think it's so important to look at both sides of the coin here. Without the $1 million mindset, you're likely underpricing, usually based on time or even the client's budget, not on outcomes. You're only doing business development when the pipeline is dry or when you're feeling, oh no, my project is about to end. You might be over delivering to justify fees and knowing that you're on the way to burnout. You might be starting from scratch on every project or building up every project kind of in a bespoke way without also creating reusable intellectual property along the way. So treating yourself as a client as an equal to the client that you're delivering for. You might be letting setbacks derail your momentum and your confidence. You might be overthinking, overcomplicating. The result here without a $1 million mindset is that you're stuck in that doer identity, that consultant identity, that employee identity, not the business owner identity who is 110% confident you've got $1 million business, even if your bank account doesn't show it right this minute or your, P&L. And as a result, you're hitting a ceiling because you end up creating a business model, a business approach, and a mindset that leads you to tie your revenue to effort instead of value, to think that whatever you're making right now is the most amount that is possible for you. and really putting a ceiling on yourself as a result. That's what happens without the $1 million mindset. So that's our quick refresher. Now let's talk about the 6 pillars of a $1 million mindset. So those 6 pillars or categories or components rather, the 6 pillars or components of a $1 million mindset. And of course, I'm talking in dollars right now because that's where I live in the US, but this could be a €1 million mindset or a £1 million mindset, whatever your currency is. So when you think about those 6 pillars, they are business owner identity, strategic discipline, demand ownership, value-centric pricing, asset thinking, and growth resilience. Those are the 6. Again, we talked about business owner identity and strategic discipline last week in episode 231. This week, we're going to cover demand ownership, value-centric pricing, asset thinking, and growth resilience. All right, so with that, let's dive into them. So we have a lot to cover here today. Okay, demand ownership. This is you taking full responsibility for creating consistent demand in your business. I'm going to say it again. You taking full responsibility for creating consistent demand through intentional, proactive business development processes. You taking full responsibility. I'm pausing there because so often we don't think we have full control over our demand, and we do. You do have full control over your demand. When you think you don't have full control over your demand, or you find all the reasons why you don't have full control over your demand, meaning the types of leads in your pipeline, the amount of leads in your pipeline, the quality of the leads in your pipeline, the quantity, the weighted value of your pipeline, when you don't think you have full control over that, you are definitely not in a $1 million mindset. That will definitely keep you stuck in under earning. Now, you might argue with me, oh, well, I don't have control over XYZ, whether they want to work with me or not, XYZ company. Of course you don't. None of us do. You can definitely set yourself up to have the most amount of control possible to set yourself up to land deals with XYZ company, but you do have control. That's a micro thinking. The macro thinking is there is demand for what you do. Your job is to go find it. So the key characteristics of demand ownership, of a demand ownership mindset, are that you have, and system really, are that you have a repeatable system for generating leads and staying visible. So you know exactly what you need to do, how much activity, what are the activities, inbound and outbound, to fill your pipeline and to create those leads, to create the demand, to create excess demand. You can go back to the episode on excess demand after this and listen to that. That's what this is all about. You are someone who nurtures relationships even when you're fully booked. You are someone who nurtures relationships even when you're fully booked. So often as independent consultants, we stop doing relationship nurturing. We stop doing business development because we feel like we can't handle any more work. And so therefore we end up creating peaks and valleys in our pipeline. You're someone, when you've got a demand ownership mindset, you're someone who builds a pipeline with future focused activity. So you're constantly proactively working on generating leads and not just reacting to things that come to you. Of course, things that come to you and you being sought after is incredibly valuable. But at the same time, you've got that good balance of you taking action that then, such as being visible and creating thought leadership that then creates you to be sought after and generates those inbound leads. Demand ownership also looks like you tracking activity, whether it's outbound activity, whether it's inbound demand, posting on LinkedIn or a Substack or a podcast of your own, or speaking for other people's audiences. You're tracking that activity so that then when I do X activity, I get Y results. It's not because X activity equals Y, this action creates this exact result. It's more about this bundle of activities creates this bundle of results. So that then what your levers are to scale up and down when you want to drive more demand into your pipeline. And a demand ownership mindset and approach treats lead generation as a non-negotiable. as a non-negotiable, not something you do when you have the time. So now let's talk about the opposite. What is not demand ownership? It's not relying on word of mouth. It's not stopping business development when you're busy. It's not believing that if you do great work, the next project will come. And it's not about letting discomfort or perfectionism block you or stop you or give you a good reason to defer till next week. Demand ownership is one of the keys to you being successful and being able to have a long lasting business. So let's talk about very specifically what is the difference between a 200K ish business mindset and a $1 million business owner mindset. The 200K business owner often might say something to themselves like, most of my work comes from referrals. I should probably be more consistent with business development. Or even, I know I should be more consistent with business development. It might sound like I'm doing well. I've replaced my corporate income, but I don't have control over my demand. I don't have control over my pipeline. Whereas a $1 million mindset thinks and says something, whether it's to themselves or to others. I know how to drive demand. My pipeline is my responsibility and in my control. Do you see the difference there? You want to be moving more toward that $1 million mindset so that you can generate a million or even double where you're at right now. Get yourself from 200 to 400 or 500, 750, whatever number you want to pick. Okay, let's talk about number 4. Number 4 of the pillars that we're going over here today. It is value-centric pricing. So the definition of this particular mindset is you confidently pricing your services based on the outcomes and the impact you deliver, not the time or effort it takes. So that's what value-centric pricing is. I'm sure you're well aware of this. Let's talk about the key characteristics of a value-centric based pricing mindset. This is where you might have a gap. So many of us do. Likely you know logically what value-based pricing is. Where the gap often occurs, almost always occurs from the consultants that I talk with and work with, is in the mindset side of this. The mindset side of this from a characteristics perspectives are you thinking about pricing from a business value perspective to your clients and really building out a thought process and a strategy and a sales process that helps you to uncover and elicit the business value without talking yourself out of it. So often I talk to consultants and they tell me, well, I can't claim that I'm driving all that value. Of course, the client has a part to play in driving the business value. Of course, I can't guarantee the business value. My clients have to contribute to this effort in order to make sure that we achieve the business value. And so therefore, what portion of the value am I contributing to? And so then they get themselves all wrapped around the axle here. When you're thinking from a value-based pricing or value-centric pricing mindset, you're figuring out what is the ultimate value of the work that your engagement would be delivering. And then you're taking a percentage of that, maybe 3-5%. It doesn't have to be a huge number. And then you're selling yourself on that first before you're working to sell your client on what value it is that you would be bringing to the table. Value-centric pricing relies on you selling yourself mentally and in order to help the client understand the value. That mindset relies on using anchors like return on investment and the strategic importance of work and the cost of inaction to that client or the cost of ineffective action to that client if you were not involved. That mindset helps you position proposals around the transformation, not that you would be helping that client to achieve, not just the scope or the features and functions of what you're doing. And that mindset is one where you're comfortable discussing money, where you're comfortable saying things to the client or asking questions to the client that might get a strong reaction from them and being able to handle that because of the way you're thinking. It's not about you. You're not selling yourself. Even though you're an independent consultant, you're selling the results. So decoupling the value-centric pricing mindset decouples you from what you're selling so that it can feel more business oriented. So often I hear, well, I was able to do this in corporate. I could offer, certain pricing. I could help the salespeople sell the work that we are delivering. I could talk about the budgets internally. Money was not a problem. All of a sudden now money's a problem in your mind, if you're like a lot of consultants, because you're starting to make it about you. The value centric pricing mindset decouples those things, even though you're a company of one. And what it's not, what this pricing mindset is not, is you basing fees off of what feels fair. That is also a mindset. You deciding in your mind what feels fair is completely made up. What the market will bear is completely made up, plus or minus, of course. There's some realm of reality, but oftentimes we're the ones deciding what that is, which is our comfort zone, which ends up creating underpricing, under earning. It's you getting to the point where you're not underpricing out of fear of losing a deal, where you're not offering pricing based on what the value is, or based on, quite frankly, what the value of your capacity is. And you only have so many hours in the week that you can be doing client work. What is that number that the work needs, that you need a price at to hit your revenue goals? And backing into it versus trying to figure out what each deal will likely take and then hoping that you'll create that will help all add up at the end of the day to your annual revenue goal. So you see the difference between value centric pricing and the typical way that consultants that are not making $1 million are thinking about pricing, and being able to shift for yourself into that value centric pricing so you can set yourself up to reach bigger and better goals financially, and also in terms of the way you're feeling fulfilled and by the nature of the work that you're doing. And ultimately, so you're working within the amount of time you want to be working, not overworking. All right, because ultimately you're deciding when you're working, for whom you're working, for how much you're working, all of it you get to decide. And a lot of it relies on this value centric pricing mindset. All right, let's compare the 200K mindset to the $1 million mindset. What does it sound like? A 200K mindset, again, there's nothing wrong with having a 200K mindset. So many of us are there for, right now, or have been there for a long time, not a problem. But I want to help you to see the difference so that you can start moving in in the direction of the $1 million mindset. So the 200K mindset might sound something like, I charge based on how much time I think the project will take. I charge based on how much I think the client will be willing to pay, based on my best guess and what I'm asking during the sales cycle. I charge based on what I think the market will bear, or based on what I think is realistic. Those are the ways that a 200K earner often thinks. $1 million mindset sounds something like it sounds different, sounds something like, I charge based on the value the client will receive. I charge based on what the effective rate would be for the time that I'm giving to this client. Again, not because we're charging based on hourly rates, but based on the value of that capacity that you're giving to that client. When you're thinking like $1 million earner, the value of that capacity is then what you're charging to the client, because it aligns to the value they would be receiving, or some small portion of the value they would be ultimately achieving. And therefore, you're getting a win-win. The client's ultimately going to get the value that they're wanting to accomplish, and you are selling work that is representative of the capacity that you're selling to that client. And that ultimately leads you to create that $1 million in a year. So that's what the value-centric pricing mindset looks like and sounds like. Now let's talk about the asset thinking component of the $1 million mindset. This is where the definition here, where you're viewing your expertise as intellectual property and turning it into repeatable tools, frameworks, and systems that grow your business beyond your time, that adds value to your business beyond a specific engagement. The key characteristics of asset thinking are that you're thinking honestly all the time In parallel with the work that you're doing with your clients, you're constantly thinking about, how can this contribute to my intellectual property? How can this contribute to the frameworks or the diagnostic tools or the methodologies that you've already built? Or how could this be a new one, new framework, new methodology, new tool that you haven't yet built, that in this engagement that you might be working on then becomes a part of your tool belt, your tool kit as you approach new clients and work with new clients. The asset thinking mindset is someone who increasingly deepens and is focused on increasingly deepening their expertise, their value, their differentiation in their niche. It's using assets in both delivery and marketing to increase leverage. So you're constantly thinking about, as you're delivering, how could this be, how could this, what I'm doing right now, be a marketing piece? How could it be a piece of content or a white paper? It's you thinking constantly about how to systematize delivery so that you can reduce time per engagement. It's you thinking about, how can you start capturing and codifying what it is you do and how you think when you're engaging with a client so that you can set yourself up to pass that on to other consultants, whether it's subcontractors that you or other support that you want to bring in, whether they're client facing or not, or perhaps codifying and capturing what it is you do and how you think about the problems that you solve for your clients so that you could potentially sell those to other consultants at some point in the future. That's what asset thinking, what some of the characteristics of asset thinking. What asset thinking is not. It's not you avoiding the repurposing. It's not you avoiding or thinking you don't have time to codify what it is you do or develop frameworks or methodologies. It's not you, it's definitely not you ignoring the fact that you're building a reputation for what you do or even a body of work. It's the opposite of what we just talked about, essentially. Let's put this into context when you think about comparing the 200K mindset to the $1 million mindset. 200K mindset is you thinking something to the effect of, every client is different. What every client is different. So it's hard to have a methodology or a framework. I'm oftentimes feeling like I'm starting from scratch. When this is not true, if I were to push you, if we were talking one-on-one and I were to push you, you would start to see those commonalities. There are commonalities between the client work, between the clients that you're working with. It's about you not blocking yourself from those by that simple sentence in your mind. Every client is different. Every client is unique. That's a blocking mindset. That's a thought error, and it's preventing you from finding the commonalities. Of course, every client is different in unique ways, but there is commonality, and you want to be looking for that, not trying to talk yourself out of it. The other one I often hear is, what I do isn't unique. There are so many leadership development consultants out there. There are so many fractional CFOs out there. You name it, whatever it is you're doing, you could certainly find a way to justify that what you do isn't unique. But the way you approach it is unique. And so you want to be looking at the opposite of those types of blocking thoughts and shift into a mindset that sounds something like, I'm a consultant who continuously codifies my approach because I have a unique way of thinking. I have a unique way of approaching this. Even if what you do isn't, at the end of the day, might not be fully unique, the way you approach it is unique because you're a human, a unique human who has a different style, who has a different personality, who has a different way of approaching and working with clients. That does make you unique just by definition. So thinking something like, I continuously codify my approach to build my unique frameworks and methodologies. I use them in multiple ways in marketing, sales, and delivery. And I'm adding more value to clients. I'm increasing the value to my business, and I'm setting my business up for the future. That's the way $1 million consultant thinks. They're not trying to justify why they're not good enough or why what they do isn't unique or why everything needs to be different because clients are different. They're not even thinking like that and trying to talk themselves out of it. They're thinking about, how is what they do unique? How is every client, in what ways does every client have commonality? It's the shifting of the question, and it's the shifting of the quality of the questions that they're asking themselves in order to get to a higher level of thinking as it comes to their assets. All right, number 6, the final component of $1 million mindset is your growth resilience. This is you sustaining through the ups and downs of business ownership, especially when it feels hard or uncertain. I'll say it again. You having a growth resilient mindset, which is one component of the 6 of $1 million mindset. Being growth resilient is you sustaining through the ups and downs of business ownership, especially when it feels hard or uncertain. What does that look like? It means that you're moving forward despite fear or discomfort or setbacks. Most of the time, running a business is not comfortable. You might feel overwhelmed. You might feel disappointed. You might feel worried. You might feel rejected. You might feel afraid. You might feel that this isn't sustainable. You're moving forward anyway. Those feelings are emotions. They are not a problem. It only becomes a problem when you allow those to slow you down or cause you to rethink, overthink, revisit decisions you've already made, talk yourself out of taking action. Another key component of a growth resilient mindset is you experiencing rejection or failure and going and not stalling or spiraling out. It's you having a mindset practice that allows you to regulate your energy and your focus and your inner critic, your self-talk, so you can stay in motion. It's you adapting quickly to feedback and market shifts and client changes, not because you're afraid or not because you've started questioning what you're doing, but because you are coming at it from $1 million mindset, which is taking that feedback in as data and making your best hypothesis of how to address it in a way that moves you forward, not taking action or reacting out of fear or uncertainty. And it's you seeing obstacles as data versus a proof of inadequacy. You can gather evidence all day long in your mind and looking out and, looking for things, researching, or even just simply looking at emails or notes that someone sends you. You could find evidence that things are not working or that you've been rejected or you're failing or you don't know what you're doing or you should change your strategy. You can find all of that evidence. Equally, if you look, you can find the evidence, the data that proves you do know what you're doing, that proves that you are on the path toward meeting your goals, towards you being able to have more control over your pipeline. You are in charge of you finding the data that best supports you. Don't go looking for evidence of your failure. Go looking for evidence that shows that you are on the path to success. So now let's talk about the opposite. What is not growth resilient mindset? It's not you pausing actions because you get a no. It's not letting doubt letting doubt dictate your decisions or your pricing. It's not you waiting to feel confident before taking action. I see this so often. People waiting to feel confident, waiting for someone to give them permission, which, by the way, is only you, right? Waiting to get some kind of permission before they feel confident, before they take action or take bold action. It's not you viewing setbacks as a sign that you should pull back or stay safer or go smaller. That's not growth resilience. Growth resilience is you sustaining, which means continuing forward through the ups and downs of business ownership because you know that you are going to have ups and downs. That's part of what it is to run a business and to own a business. So coming to terms with that and embracing it versus arguing with reality is growth resilience. So let's compare and contrast the 200K mindset to the $1 million mindset. At 200K, you might be thinking something like, this feels hard. I don't know if I can keep this up. I just had a win, but I don't know if I can do it again. maybe I'm not cut out for this, versus the $1 million mindset, which sounds like this feels hard and I know I can handle it. That's not a problem. That's the difference in the way growth resilience looks between 200K and $1 million. So now, as we wrap up, we're going to wrap up today's episode. What I want to encourage you to do is to put these two episodes together, the 6 components of your $1 million mindset. And I'll remind you one more time of what they are. They're the business owner identity. They're the strategic discipline. They're the demand ownership, the value-centric pricing, asset thinking, and growth resilience. Those are the 6 pillars of a $1 million mindset. I want to encourage you today to go out and start thinking about, set aside some time, start rating yourself on these 6 components of your mindset. Which one has the most opportunity for growth? And then start focusing in on building up that mindset. Do one at a time. You don't have to boil the ocean here. Pick one that you know will move the needle for you and start implementing it in a way that focuses on what those key characteristics are that I shared with you, and doing more of those and doing less of the ones which are the opposite, what the $1 million mindset isn't for that particular component. You can leverage the Business Brain Journal to help you accomplish this. When it's ready, you can get on the wait list at melissalieberman.com/growth-atlas-products. And you'll be the first to know when the Business Brain Journal is available. And you can grab it to set off on your 100-day business, up-leveling your mindset to achieve that $1 million mindset over the course of those 100 days. And then finally, I want to encourage, if you want help implementing, seek help. Whether it's working with me as a coaching client or someone else, I encourage you to have support. This is what $1 million business owners do. They don't go alone. They don't try to do it the cheapest way. They go out and find someone who can support them and help them to see what they're not able to see because they're living inside their own mind. And that's for you too. It's so often hard to see for ourselves where we're getting in our own way. And that's where coaching comes into play. So if you're looking for support to help you go further faster in your consulting business, you can go to consultmelisa.com. My name is spelled Melisa, consultmelisa.com, and apply for a coaching exploratory call where we'll talk about what it is, where you're at right now, where you want to be, what's getting in your way, and help you to build out a plan and determine if coaching would be the best fit for you to achieve that plan. So with that, I look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care. Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.